Okay, all right, we're live. Evening, everyone. I'm Professor McCoy. Welcome back. Not exactly to Clair Obscur Expedition 33 this time, but to talking about Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This time with Adam, who if you've seen stuff from my channel, you've seen Adam before, and if you've seen stuff from his channel, then you've obviously seen him before. But if you haven't, then you should. You can find his channel linked in the description already too. So after this, go check him out if you haven't. So, hey Adam, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I am glad to be here. I consider myself your resident literary expert slash French whipping boy. So I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I think those are both fair. Uh, I should clarify on the French note there. I've occasionally had to call on you for translation stuff throughout our playing Expedition 33. And this is
Yeah.
something that I neglected to think of when we were just now going over what we were going to talk about. But um, the musical score of this game is one of the best parts of it.
Oh
Did
yes,
you have any thoughts about
absolutely.
any of the poetry that in there and any of the lyrics and the Frenchness of it? Or?
I mean, say what you want about the French, but
I will.
French is a beautiful language, and I will defend that statement till my dying day. It's just the phonetics and the way that it sounds, and I mean, people bash us. I'm using us here to refer to the French collectively, but people bash the French all the time for their kind of fluid vowels and forgetting letters and silent things, and but the music proves my point that French is just a beautiful language. If you actually take time to dig into a translation of the lyrics, which I did provide you early
Oh
on,
yeah.
Vince.
Hmm.
There's a lot of interesting foreshadowing, I think. Now knowing what I know about the plot of the game, I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
interesting kind of foreshadowing about kind of what is to come and kind of what helped build the backstory of this setting. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of good, just kind of that gut wrenching heart stuff, kind of digging deeper into the lyrics.
Oh yeah.
I am I am a little frustrated that the only spoken French I heard was mostly swearing. So I mean, I did
So
pick up some French I
there
did
is
pick up
a
some French in that regard. Uh,
oh good.
but I, I honestly wish that the Gestrels would have spoken a little bit more French. I thought that would have been cute.
Yeah,
Just kind of
if
up
they
and
had
down.
spoken some
Yeah.
goofy pigeon version of French, that would have been really fun.
Yes.
Now I will say there is a story behind the only French dialogue being profanity, um, because the English voice cast, the only one who spoke any French was the voice for Esquier, the big marshmallow man. The rest
Mhm.
of them, the English voice actors were just English and American voice actors, and I think a Canadian
Right.
in there somewhere. Um, Not a French Canadian though. So none of them spoke a word of French and had no notion of French pronunciation at all. And so the director of the game, whose name is slipping my mind, but kudos to him, excellently well done. Apparently, he was spending a lot of time trying to get all of the actors to properly pronounce these French curse words that were used throughout, which
Mhm.
some of the behind the scenes stuff for this game is just
Oh
actually
yeah.
absolutely worth watching. Yeah.
Yeah, I went and watched the behind the scenes video they did of the director trying to teach the actors how
Mhm.
to pronounce these French curse words, and it was just absolutely delightful. They're like, "Why do I say it that way?" And it's just the way the French do these things.
Mhm. Mhm.
A's and I's get thrown around, and you never know how they're pronounced until a word is put together. So,
And as far as I'm aware, there's no other language that uses the French R phoneme. So
um,
all.
I I don't think so. If I had to say, there's a possibility Spanish might, but I don't think that's the case.
No, I speak Spanish. It doesn't.
So
There may be
okay,
some
well
obscure
then,
languages that might use it in a different context, but no, the Spanish R is different from English
from the
R,
French are
but it's also different from
right from the
French. Yeah,
French
they're
are
all three
yeah.
distinct.
Um, yeah. I don't know if we want to touch into this just yet, but while we're on the topic of French, I thought the choice of names, knowing what little I know of French was very interesting. For
So,
example, we have
are you going
we
to
have
say?
like
Are you going to
Renoir.
say? Oh, Renoir. Okay, I was going to go to Verso because that was actually one that I
Oh,
noticed in particular.
yeah, I definitely have thoughts on Verso, but Renoir was the one that really stuck out to me because
See, that I don't. I'm not
Noir
sure
is
the meaning of that one. Oh, is oh
yeah. So
dark, right? Dark black, something like that.
yes, so Noir is the French word for black, and re is basically like the French prefix for like beginning. So like you think of words like Renaissance, it's kind of a similar thing. So
Oh,
to
okay.
basically re-black or black again, or in some cases even like blacker, like using it
Hmm.
as an intensifier of the adjective there.
Fascinating. Well, also, hi Grace in the chat. On to your point that oh well, the Canadian voice actor should have been half decent unless they're from anywhere northwest of Ontario. Funny you should say that. I think he's from Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. So no. Um, I think it's the voice actor from Minoko, and I think he's from Toronto, but I'm not actually sure of that. So don't necessarily quote me on it.
Yeah, the Renoir was fascinating.
Yeah.
I know you said you found Verso fascinating, and Verso, at least to me, is interesting because depending on context, the word verse, VERS, can actually mean two different things. It can mean to turn, if you think like conversion or reversion, but
Right.
it can also mean like to pour. And we
Ooh.
constantly see throughout the course of the game, like Verso just pouring his heart out to help
Yeah.
these people. So there's kind of a double meaning depending on
He's
how you view
he's
the
also like a
version of the word.
he's also like a triple traitor in some sense if you think of the plot of the game too. Like he is
Right.
turning
Yeah.
on the party and on Mael and on Renoir and on painted Renoir and like almost constantly for again for interesting and legitimate perhaps legitimate purposes but still what triggered what made me think of that of Verso and his the significance of his name um was in the first Axon fight with um, the mask one, Visage,
Mhm.
um, which is supposed to be a representation of Verso, a representation of Verso from Renoir, um, and that is um, it says something like the talking about the two sides of a mask, the front and the back, but uses the French terms verso meaning in verse, the back of
Right.
the mask. I was like, oh, wait a
Mhm.
minute. Okay, hold on. There's a connection here, isn't there? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And
Very
especially
cool.
you think of Verso's interest in music. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a verse, too, again,
Yeah, true.
being kind of that connection of like the melody to another part of the piece.
Yeah. Though I will say the
So,
names are not quite as on the nose as some other media uh like Freerin, for example. Like all of the names have very direct, obvious meanings. Or like Erica's D&D campaigns. Her NPCs tend to have spoilery names, so to speak.
oh,
Um,
yes.
which
As, yeah,
I do that too. To be fair, found it to be interesting and helpful.
yeah, all of the names of my major NPCs have the spoiler written right into the name, which is why my players more than often are just giggling to themselves because they already know the plot twist before it happens. I'm like, well, don't say I didn't warn you. So,
Uh-huh.
um,
All right. So the first major point of contention I want to get into is video games as literature and whether they are or are not or can be literature. And I take the view that I either because I'm not all the way settled on this because again this isn't quite my area of expertise. I either take the view that they are literature but can be good or bad as literature, but can still be but that's a different standard of good or bad game. Or that
mm,
some games should be considered literature and others not really. But I'm not sure which one of those to take, but I think I hold one or the other of those views. What do you think?
Okay.
Is this plausible, or is this academically unorthodox, and I will be drummed from the academy for saying such things? Or
I would say that if you were brought before a Department of English within a
oh,
university setting, you would be laughed out of the room.
something I greatly dread.
You'd be laughed out of the room. They're like they would say to you, well, if you want to go and discuss video games as literature, head to the communication department, not the English department.
That's silly. Um, okay, so let's get what would be a relatively standard definition of literature, and then what would be
Right.
the sort of categories, because we kind of talked about this in a previous discussion. Which
Yeah.
one? But yeah, one of our previous discussions we talked about this bit.
We
Oh, in
we
our
talked about
postmodernism
it
one.
in
That's
our postmodernism discussion. Excellent video. If you haven't checked that out yet, please
Mhm.
do. It's one of my favorites. So, um, but to give a broad definition of literature, because it's kind of this category that contains a couple different subcategories. But to speak in broad terms, literature is basically anything that is primarily meant to be consumed in a written format.
Hmm.
Which is why I personally am of the opinion that video games cannot be considered literature because they're not meant to be kind of consumed or like read in the traditional like book sense of the term. Now, of course, there are plenty of people that would push back on that, and I'm going to give myself a little bit of a counter argument here.
I'm getting
Things
ready with
like
some. Go on.
things like poetry slams and Shakespeare and those things are meant to be performed,
Mhm.
much like video games are meant to be played through. Um, but again, as an English major, we kind of studied the text in terms of how it was formed, and we looked at specifically like when we studied Shakespeare, we looked at it as how well does the story flow rather than how well do these particular actors perform the given text.
Okay. So in that sense, in that way, I think that something like a play, right? Because Shakespeare we think of as almost prototypically literature, but
Yes.
with the caveat that we can examine the literary aspects of the play rather than the performative aspects, and those are different considerations. Something like that.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Hold on one moment. I have it's a child crisis. Just give me 1 second. Um, Feel free to continue and then fill me in a moment. I'll be back in a moment.
Yeah. So while Vince has gone to kind of further make my case, I currently see video games as not being literature simply because of the medium in which they're presented. They are mostly presented through a visual format, which is not common to literature. Most times, when you're discussing through discussing through the game, you're discussing aspects of kind of gameplay and game design, and you're not really all that focused on character development and things of that nature. However, there have been some recent franchises, recent games, and even some more of your classic RPG franchises that do tend more toward the literary side. I'm calling to mind things like the Final Fantasy series, things like the Baldur's Gate franchise, especially with Baldur's Gate 3, has a lot of good kind of literary elements. The characters seem
Okay.
very well fleshed out. And I mean, even something like you consider the world building of something like the Dragon Age series. I would consider that to be a good kind of counter argument, taking those kind of overarching stories as a whole to be viewed as literature. But
Mhm.
again, I think my where I draw the line is the medium in which it's presented. And because video games are more of a visual medium than kind of a auditory medium, that's kind of how I'm drawing the distinction. Fully aware that dramas are meant to be kind of more visual representations of a text,
Mhm.
but I think that distinction can still be kept intact while acknowledging that drama is kind of the redheaded stepchild of the literary family, if you will.
Okay, so from what I just picked up, I want to actually bring in a couple of questions from the chat to help clarify here, because I think Imsip and Grace both had I think maybe useful clarifying questions. One about film and one about audiobooks. So audiobooks, from what I understand, probably would just be literature because it's word, right? It's
Right.
right. Okay,
Yep.
simple enough. Fair enough. Got it. What about film? And to what extent, like, would we make the distinction between the screenplay as the literary aspect of the film, as distinct from the as distinct from the performance aspect? Can you make that case, or is that just its own separate thing? What do you think? Or at least, what is the sort of
Having
consensus?
mm,
Is there an academic consensus on this?
I mean, a lot of kind of literary critics will look to films in terms of like how well does a film adapt a literary text to the screen. So oftentimes there will be discussions of like how well does Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet compare to the original Shakespeare? How well does I'm 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 sure given a couple months and there will be literary critics kind of decrying or proclaiming the merits of Christopher Nolan's Odyssey film and kind
I
of
bet.
comparing that to the original text. But they kind of see film as how well does this adapt a previously written story.
Okay.
If a film were to kind of tell its own story without drawing on any previous literary reference, I think they would say that's kind of not our department. That's not our business. We're going to stay out of that discussion because that's better left to the film critics. That's better left to those who study cinematography and things like that. Because at least with film, from my understanding, and I did end up taking a film class in college to learn kind of the history behind filmmaking. From what I understand, film, especially in terms of scene play, that is so married to kind of the technical terms of cinematography and kind of lighting and shading and camera angles that in order to divorce those two and study the screenplay on its own as literature, it's like you're missing kind of half the picture. It's like you've got the background.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you've got the main elements, but you're missing the background of the painting, if you will.
Interesting.
So
So that maybe that's why I have a problem, or some critiques at least, of mainstream film criticism, because it does so often seem to neglect um, what I would think of as literary elements of film, like the actual like characterization, plotting, and things like that, things that you would critique in if it were a book, if it were a novel, you know.
And I mean, to give them credit, there are professors currently teaching in academic institutions. They have courses called Film as Literature.
Mhm.
And I think those classes should be abolished and those professors should be burned at the stake, but that's just my opinion.
Wow. Okay. That's a little extreme, but I'll take it. Um, I maybe we need just a maybe we need a broader category that literature, as commonly understood, as academically understood,
Mm,
fits into, that has room for these other, say, genres of media that still do the thing that literature does, but using different
right.
methods.
I think I think if you wanted to expand that out, and given your
But they do
background in
want to.
philosophy, you might given your background in philosophy, you might balk at this. But if I wanted to expand and include kind of films in that category, I think it would be better to say maybe take a look at the humanities as a whole rather than just literature specifically. Because film, I would argue, is kind of part of that humanities sphere, just because of the nature of what's being produced and how it's being produced.
Well, yes, but I think that winds up being too broad, right? Because the humanities
Okay.
includes things as diverse as philosophy and history, which are radically different from literature or film or theater, or honestly, I would
Right.
almost qualify it as close as, well, I'm gonna put this. Typically,
Well,
film studies or
mhm,
film criticism seems to sway more towards the study of art, like equivalent to visual art, than it does towards literature. And maybe that's a problem I have with film criticism,
Yes.
at least as it's understood in the mainstream.
That is honestly the same criticism that I have in terms of why I do not care for film criticism.
And yet you beat them out of your literary departments with a broom.
Yes, I'm like, no, shoot, you go, you know, go clean your cameras and kind of respec those angles and make sure you're getting the wide shots and the close-ups and just shoot. Just shoot. This is library, go away.
Okay, well, it is fine, but you find films in a library, so calm down a little bit. So that's the thing, though, is I agree. Get all of that stuff. Shoo. That's not, or I guess you're over there, so shoo, away from you.
Right.
But at the same time, I think that you can do something like a literary analysis of film, just like kind of transitioning back to our initial topic. I think you can perfectly well do a literary analysis of a game, like you were giving these examples of especially story and character driven games that center around the narrative and center around the character interactions and whatnot. Now,
yes, in fact,
go for it. Go.
I was gonna say when I was an undergrad taking my first literary criticism class, our final paper was to basically take a text and kind of run it through one of these forms of criticism, and I kind of skirted outside the meaning of the term text because knowing that my professor was a staunch Christian, I wound up, I was like, hey, there's this children's show called VeggieTales, and I'm going to do a literary analysis of a VeggieTales episode, and she approved it, and I got an A, and it was the best A I ever received. So excellent. Yes, there are kind of literary merits to film, and I think if we wanted to broaden things without making it so broad, I think the proper term would be media. Not necessarily literature, not necessarily humanities, but media. I mean, we have a whole channel in your server devoted to talking about all sorts of things of that nature, and that's what you called it. You called it media, because all these things can be discussed under that one simple umbrella.
I will say, when forming the channels in our Discord server, I did put a lot of thought into that as to what to call that channel in particular. Literature was one of the things I was considering, but I knew that, well, I didn't realize it would deeply trigger you in particular. I didn't know you yet, but I guess I didn't, so that's nice. But I did have a feeling that it would mislead tremendously. But on the other hand, I feel like it has, in some cases, misled in the other direction, where when I will start talking about novels and things in the media channel, and instead of, say, talking about, I don't know, internet drama or Hollywood actors or whatnot, which I don't think fits within the media channel technically, which, by the way, if you're watching, that doesn't fit in the media channel. Put it in the news channel. It's where that goes. Yeah, in that sense, right, I would say that the media in this case, I think it would include literature, but people think that's weird because they think, oh, media, that means like, oh, well, that means social media, that means Hollywood, that means movies and TV.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I was just about to make that point. I think to your point, Vince, the reason why people are taking it so far in the other direction is we've become so saturated with this idea of social media and kind of the movie circuit and Hollywood that whenever we hear the term media, that is what we think of. Not even just news media, but just media in general. We think of it as
whatever happens on a screen.
Yeah. Solely the visual media, and I think I picked up right away that the channel within that server is meant to encompass far more than just things like film and television. But I think that would at least be my explanation as to why the term media is being taken in the other direction.
I think you're probably right, and I think that I all of the channels in my Discord server have descriptions. Like you can click those. So it does kind of clarify what that means. So, that's your fault if you didn't, see that. I should have a quiz to to join the channel, to join the server or something, I guess. But
That
I'm
would
not going to
be
do that.
hilarious.
I'm not going to do that.
No.
This is my extracurricular server. I have an academic server that I use for my actual classes, which is a very separate thing. And no, you're not invited. That is actually for my real teaching classes.
Students.
So yeah,
Right. Yes.
Different thing. Which honestly I made during the pandemic when we decided to use Discord instead of Teams, Microsoft Teams, because it's awful. But I digress. So you're
Okay.
pushing me towards the former of my two possible views, right? Which is that video games are. I still think that video games are literature, but that the literary aspect of a game is something that is evaluable, whatever, can be evaluated separately from its quality as a game. And that those are separate categories. Right? So any game has literary aspects. And those can be critiqued separately from its quality as a game, or a game, if you will. I'm leaning towards that one, rather than saying, like, some games are literature and some games aren't really. Like, Doom might not be literature. Well, no, Doom is literature. It's just, it's very shallow.
Right.
Yeah.
And to piggyback off of what you just said, I would argue that the literary merits of a game should be analyzed separately from the game aspects of the game. Not only can they be, but they should be analyzed separately from the game aspects. I feel like I'm in the minority here, but when I sit down and play a game, the reason I play those games is to invest myself in a story. If I'm not invested in the story of a game, I will stop playing said game, because that's what I go to games for, is to enjoy a good story.
Me too, for the most part. There are minor exceptions to that. But for the most part, yeah. Now, that said, I think we have to address certain aspects that make gaming different from other genres of media in terms of its literary capacity, or its capacity to tell a narrative in a unique way. I think that interactive element to it is crucial. That's part of what makes it unique. I've heard this said somewhere by somebody that what makes a game different from a book is that it has a failure state, right? You don't have to do anything aside from reading the words to get through the narrative of a book, but for a game, you have to do the narrative, right?
Yes.
There's an element of that. I don't know if that's the most relevant. But do you have thoughts on that particular bit? As to what that can do in literary terms?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. The fact that games are interactive, whereas traditional literature is not, I mean, that's a big reason why the literary aspect should be analyzed separately from the game aspect, because you are the engine driving the story of that game. That's why... That's honestly why, in my opinion, I think games like Baldur's Gate 3 became so popular, was because of the fact that there were all of these branching endings, and you felt like your decisions actually mattered within the greater context of plot of the game.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, how to what extent can we say that you are co-writing the story with the actual developers? Because there's an extent to which clearly your playthrough of the game will be different from someone else's, and so your story will be different from someone else's. And how much of that is the illusion of choice, and does that matter?
Right. And I think, honestly, given again the medium of games and analyzing the literary aspect of a game, I think that really, it does and it doesn't, for separate reasons. It does because without your input, The game basically is just this stagnant text that no one is kind of acting upon. So it's basically just a world where nothing is really happening because you're not there to make the decisions and force the choices.
Mhm.
So it is important. On the other hand, it isn't important because with a thing like a game, there are already a set number of predetermined outcomes as to how the game will conclude. A
Mhm.
game, a video game especially, it's not like a campaign of Dungeons and Dragons where the DM just kind of sets the ball rolling and the players kind of decide the fate of the ending, as it were.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah, I think it does matter in terms of just really giving the player agency to push the story in the direction that they choose. But then again, it doesn't because again, the writers of the game, hopefully, and again, I would point to a game like Dragon Age: The Veilguard in that respect, where they've already written the ending, and as much as you want to save the world, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you
Well,
can't.
to get wildly off topic from Expedition 33, if you look at, if you compare that to Dragon Age Origins, right? Dragon Age Origins genuinely had a vast array of different endings because of all the basically end screens that wrap up all of the various loose ends of the game. Sure, there are effectively two actual like endings of the game. Either you win and die, the Grey Warden, the hero for Eldon, wins,
Yep.
defeats the Archdemon, and dies in the process, or wins, defeats the Archdemon, and survives because of the Dark Ritual thing. Which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch my live streams or go play the game. It's 15 years old. I think you can find it.
It's a phenomenal game.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. The first Origins is phenomenal. 2 is great. Inquisition is good. Veilguard.
Should not
Anyway,
have been made.
yeah, okay. Yeah, probably right. No, maybe it should have been made better. I think that's probably better. Anyway, sorry, sorry, I'm getting distracted. If by the way, if you would like me to torture myself through playing Dragon Age Veilguard, if you'd like to see that, throw a lot of money at me, and I'll think about it. Anyway, I don't want to though. I really don't want to ruin my good memories of that series. Anyway, though, but yeah, there is a vast distinction there, and I will say though, also, like Expedition 33, there's just two endings, right? And those two endings are entirely determined by a choice you make at the very end.
Yep.
It's not like something like Dragon Age Origins, where the endings and the various different aspects of the endings are determined by choices you make all along the way. It really is just you get to the end of the story and you choose what happens at the end, right?
Yep.
And now, I don't think that makes it worse as a game or as a story, because it's also worth noting that there are choices that you make throughout the game, and that they are significant choices in the moment. They just don't affect the outcome of the story. By that I mean,
Right.
for example, whether or not you engage in side content, right? Whether or not you go and find and ultimately gommage Painted Elysia, or um, if you go resurrect Noko in the Sacred River or not, or even at a more maybe granular or mundane level, what dialogue choices you pick in your conversations between characters. Because this is not one of those games where you can just go ahead and just go through the dialogue wheel and pick each option. Like you can talk about this thing, and then you can go and talk about the other thing, and then you can go talk about the other. No, no. The dialogue trees are very much. You pick this one. That's what Verso says, or that's what Gustav says,
Right.
and you don't find out what would have happened if he said the other thing, right? Because it's a different conversation, you know.
Yep.
So it does actually have an impact. It's just not on the ending, not where it winds up, which is an interesting philosophical conundrum, which we can
Yeah.
address in a bit. But once we get
To piggyback off of what you just said about dialogue trees, what I find to often be my own conundrum within RPGs, especially with a game like Clair Obscur, is that unlike a game Dragon Age, where you're creating your character from the ground up, Clair Obscur, they give you the character. You're playing as Verso or Gustav or whomever, and you're asked to sort through these dialogue trees. My conflict is always, do I answer in the way that I would if I were presented with this situation, or do I answer in the way that I believe the character would, given what I know about the character and their personality?
This is something that I think we also addressed at the postmodernism discussion of the 4-point RPG player character typology, I think it's called. How you see the character that you're playing. And I always do the latter of your options, right? I always ask, okay, what would the character say in this situation, even if it's a custom character. When I make a custom character, I have a character in mind, not just me playing it, right? But that's how I approach games. Maybe here we go, bringing it back to the initial topic. I approach games as literature, even if I'm playing my own character. That's just like me writing a character. Right? And so the question is the same as if I were writing a story. What would the character do in such and such circumstance?
I will say, given I've really thought about this question since you last brought it up, and when we initially talked about it during the postmodernism discussion, I was firmly in the camp of like, I create the character and I portray them as if like it was me rather than it was them. But having thought about it, the more that I try and play my characters as themselves rather than as myself, the more enjoyment I have in RPGs. I've been finding. Yeah. So I am slowly leaning toward your side of the aisle more and more the more I dive into the roleplay aspects of RPGs.
Yeah, and like you'll notice that I kind of use this language pretty consistently when I'm playing RPGs, whether that's when I'm streaming or when I'm playing D&D. I refer to characters in the third person, not the first. Right, even if it's my player character. Right. Or on rare occasions, I'll say we. I'll always include first person plural. We're going to do this. What choice are we going to make? Because I'm choosing for them. This third person involved.
And see, that's where I think I would personally differ, not to get too much off the beaten path here, but when I approach a game of D&D, I always use the first person, because more often than not, I am playing said person, regardless of class, as some sort of extension of myself that gets me more involved in the world building, that gets me more involved in the plot. If there's some hook that I can link back to my own reality,
that will hold you into the game, so to speak.
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't make that connection, but yes.
Oh no, what have I done?
Professor.
Anyway,
yes.
Yeah. Maybe Dewey was onto something. I don't know. Probably not.
No. As I perfectly.
Probably not.
I mean, maybe he was. You'll remember that I failed his system. He didn't fail me. So
naturally. Anyways, sorry, I had to bring that up. I had no choice.
Yes. So yeah, that's kind of. I mean, I feel like that's all I wanted to say on the whole video games as literature topic. I think we've kind of run that through as many kind of nooks and crannies and pathways as we can.
I don't think you've convinced me that it's not literature, but that's probably just because I have a broader view of literature as I consider that which has literary aspects to be literature insofar as it has literary aspects. Right. There's my metaphysical claim about literature. But okay, we figured out whether it's literature or not. Maybe, but what makes it French? So you said you were looking into the sort of history of French literature. And I'm curious about a couple of things. Yeah. What's distinctive about that? And then also, maybe what time period of French literature it fits into? Because this is very clearly, the game is set in turn of the 20th century France.
Mm.
Does it fit there, or does it fit more like something contemporary? I was kind of curious about that.
Well, let me put it this way, and I'll kind of back up and explain what I mean. It definitely does, but it's kind of the thing where, like, as much as you want to get away from the past, you really can't. As
Mhm.
much as the game wants to kind of hold on to that 20th century kind of aesthetic and worldview, there are kind of these echoes of older French literature that the game draws on that they really can't escape, no matter how hard, no matter how much they want to. Um, so yeah, to kind of give an example of that, I'm thinking of two very famous French. Well, one is a French text, and another one is what I call Frenchish. If we go back to the medieval period, we have the Song of Roland, which is a French text, and we have the Death of Arthur, Le Mort d'Arthur, which is actually an English text that was translated and reworked from a French text. So as much as
Something I
Clair
want to clarify about
Obscur,
this. Hold on. Something I want to clarify about that. So Morte Arthur, it was. I know it was written. It was written in French, right?
it was not. No,
No. Right.
the the
Okay.
the the original was, but the text that has been presented to us today was a British retelling of kind of one of those lost French stories. Because Thomas Mallory, who wrote Le Mort d'Arthur, was a Brit. He's like, hey, there's this obscure French folk tale about King Arthur, and I'm gonna anglicize it essentially and publish it as my
Right.
own.
Okay. So okay. So I always kind of assumed that it was just that sort of French aspect of British nobility or something like that, and that's why there was that connection. But I'd say I didn't know the history, so neat.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, because I know that
Yeah.
aspect, I know that part. Like I assumed it was like it had to do with the Normans or something. Anyway,
Oh, I mean, well, I hate to say this, but French literature in some aspects is better than Brit lit.
all right, whatever. Anyway,
So the Brits knew that they were beat, and they're like, well, if you can't beat them, I'll take their stuff and make it my own, which is exactly what
right.
Thomas Mallory did.
Okay, I mean,
So
yeah. Anyway, where were we?
the Brits had Shakespeare, and we have Moliere. So you pick
I
your poison.
mean, yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you the win there. That's fine. That's fine. The Brits are not an artistic people, really. I'm not British anyway. Why am I defending the Brits? I'm not in any way British. What am I doing here? Like, I if
You just want to
anything,
be on whatever side is anti-French,
fair
Professor.
enough.
Be
Okay,
honest.
wait a minute. Hold on. I'm Italian. We're better than you. What am I talking about? Never mind. We got it. We got this. We've Dante.
Fine, fine.
We have Dante.
I will give you Dante. I will give you Dante, Professor. You have me beat in that regard. So
I'm also Scottish, and so we've got some excellent poetry from the Scottish Renaissance. So there's that too. A little later period, but still good stuff.
mm,
Good stuff. Anyway, um, so you
yeah.
were saying
So going
something
back to your
about the
initial
history, yeah,
question,
the history of French literature and what it has to do with the game that we're talking about.
yeah. So again, as much as the game would like to stay within kind of that earliest 20th century
Mhm.
style, it's kind of like the ex-girlfriend that you loved but just could never let go of. I mean, there are callbacks to kind of this medieval kind of overly romanticized period in
Oh,
French
I see.
literature of I mean, because you think of a character like Verso slash Gustave, however you want to characterize him, and
Well, hold on, which one?
that
Because they're different characters, contrary to my initial expectation.
contrary to mine too, believe me.
Yeah.
I will say Gustav especially,
Okay.
and I mean, of course, this is before the big revelation later on,
Mhm.
but that desire to kind of protect and guide and mentor Mael
Mhm.
is very much a hallmark of France in the medieval period.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely recognize that sort of thing. Yeah. Um, I
So,
wonder
I
if
mean, as
it's.
much as yeah,
I wonder if maybe there's a layering going on, because I mean, there's a layering going on in the game in almost every narrative
hmm,
aspect of the game. If it is this kind of, I don't know, a modern modern sensibilities from the outside, from the Dissandra family, from the painters, but this more ancien and heroic tradition of not necessarily the people of Lumiere in general in the portrait in the canvas, but at least the expeditioners, like the
hmm,
party. 'Cause it seems like they at least are consistently that more more medieval tradition, at least in their outlook and how they're written as characters, much more so than the actual the painters are written more like modern, like maybe early modern, but still modern characters. Am I onto something there? What do you
exactly.
think? Does that fit?
I
I'm
de-
spitballing here.
I definitely, yeah, I definitely think so, and I will give you my biggest reason why. The
Mhm.
expeditioners, following in the footsteps of the medieval French, have hope. The
Right.
painters and the writers and all of those who are kind of living in Lumiere, just being existential, they don't have hope. That's a very modernist kind of way of viewing the world.
Hmm.
The expeditioners at least have hope that things will be getting better. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that in order to spread that hope, they have to leave Lumiere, they have to leave this light in order to go out into the darkness. And that's where their hope really blossoms and comes into full view.
They bring that light out into the darkness, something like that. Now that
Hmm.
that's actually that's particularly interesting because I think Mael or Alicia or whichever you want to call her is a particularly interesting character because I'm not sure if she maybe embodies a bit of both or maybe sort of transitions from one to the other. But it seems like early on she's much more the the heroic archetype,
Hmm.
the medieval, the expeditioner, until she gradually shifts towards being more, well, maybe think of it as becoming less Mael, more Alicia, as she kind
Hmm.
of remembers who she is on the outside and that sort of thing. She's a fascinating character in that
Right.
regard.
Oh yes, she's honestly one of my favorites. My I think she's my favorite human character out of the entire cast. Um, and I definitely think you're onto
Maybe.
something there because I think that at least with Alicia slash Mael, she is both holding on to her past as she discovers more of it, but Mael is almost this fictionalized version of herself, the person she hopes to be, the person that she wants to be, the person that she aspires to be. So she's in conflict with
Ooh,
what she knows
and
of her past
let me
and
add to this,
what she
and
wants to be.
who her mother wants her to be, or wishes she were. Because remember, she
That
was
too.
when she entered the canvas, she was sort of repainted or painted over, not just by herself, but by Aline as well. So when she's sort of born into Lumiere, it's kind of it. I see a lot of people's competing visions for themselves, for each other, for their children, that kind of thing happening, especially thematically in
Yes.
Act Three.
Yes. And I think a lot of that has to do with them being French, believe it or not, because as
Yeah, I get
as
where.
someone with not as much of a French background as I wish I had, we
You
French
wish you
are
had.
very
Sorry, go ahead.
we French are very passionate and stubborn people, and that can cause a lot of friction within families. It definitely caused a lot of friction within the Desange family because there were some children who wanted to kind of go out their own way. I mean, you think of Verso and his desire to pursue music
Yeah.
and his parents being like, no, we're going to force you to paint anyway. So you have the passion of the parents wanting to uphold the tradition, and then you have the passion of the children wanting to kind of set their own course. So again, you've got these two passions fighting, and because they're both French, they're locked in this stalemate. Neither one can overpower the other because of their Frenchiness, if you will.
Yeah. I this is going to come back up when we talk about the endings, because I think that the as I will perhaps describe it, the vice of Frenchness is largely responsible for the fact that that life always forces cruel choices, as Renoir says near the end. I think I think there's something there as to why there can't be a happy ending to the story, because it's not not to jump ahead too much, but I don't think it's not that there can't be a happy ending to the story. It's just that the characters are incapable of having a happy ending in their circumstances and who they are with who they are. But maybe they're just too French. They're just too French for a happy ending, which, I mean, that fits, right? The
Maybe.
French don't have happy endings. Do they?
No.
They certainly haven't historically.
The French don't have happy endings, and when they do, they are satirical and over the top. I mean, read some of Moliere and you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, true.
But, yeah.
So speaking of endings and Frenchness of them, one of your best reactions in the chat was to my reaction to the end of Act 2 after the defeat of the Paintress. What the hell was that?
Yep.
Is that normal?
That was the French saying, hey, you like pain? We're going to give you some more, because the French love pain. They are the ultimate kind of cultural / literary masochists, and I love them for it.
Okay, well,
there ain't no tragedy like a French tragedy, I'll put it that way.
Well, is the sort of the false victory or the false climax at the end of Act 2, is that a typical French literary trope? Is that something we see all the time, or because I don't know if I've ever seen that.
I am honestly, given what I know about the ending, I'm honestly surprised that they gave you the false climax, because usually, from what I know of French literature, when they give you a false climax like that, it's meant to drive the tension, drive the pain, but then ultimately foreshadow a happier ending. And as we've just discussed, there really is no happy ending within the end of Clair Obscur.
Yeah. Because I will say, the game does some fascinating things in its narrative. So, major spoilers if for some reason you're here and haven't either played or watched me play the game. But the end of each act is bold in terms of narrative writing and the decisions of how they wrote that. So I don't know many games, or honestly many pieces of literature, that will it'll kill off the main character at the end of Act 1. Like, especially kill off the main character played by the biggest name actor by far. And then Act 2, they win, right? It's the main quest is completed. And then it isn't anymore. Very dramatically. Right? Like, this game did some really, really bold things with its narrative in those sense. It really...
And the reason why it seems so bold is that they were leading you along, expecting you to believe one thing, but then right at that pivotal moment, they pull the rug out from under you and they reveal the truth. Oftentimes within kind of a 3-act structure of a story, Act 2 is kind of the point of no return.
Right.
So presenting it in the way that they did, I think, was very clever, because they're like, well, we're going to follow that trope, but we're going to apply a very French twist to it. We're really going to twist the knife into your expectations, and all is not what you think it is. That's just French storytelling 101 right there.
Yeah. I will say, okay, so I went back and rewatched that sequence. I was looking for the clip that I posted the other day, and it was an episode that was very, very near that point. And so I went back and rewatched that sequence, looking for that. And I don't know how they accomplished it, but they managed to, and this speaks to that distinction we were making earlier between literature proper and, say, things like things that are more visual media, like film or games in this case. That I don't know if you could accomplish what the game did in a purely literary frame, right? Which was to make this tremendous victory feel so ominous, almost purely through music and cinematography. It was done exceptionally well. Like that had
I
me
would.
like tense the entire time that tremendous whole celebration was happening. It's like you were just waiting for whatever next shoe was to drop. And then it
Yep,
did, of course. But
that's. I mean, it's the hidden Chekhov's gun. You didn't expect it to go off, but it did.
right.
And I honestly think that's why your confusion and your frustration and whatever you want to call it in that moment was so delicious to me as a Frenchman, because I'm like, yeah, you just experienced a hallmark of French storytelling, and the fact again that things are not as black and white as they seem, hinting at the title here, Clair Obscur. If something is clair in French, if the sky is clair, clair meaning clear, and obscure meaning like hidden or obscured, that's the title is literally an oxymoron. It is both clear and obscure. It is both.
Well, it's a reference to it's a reference to the artistic style, right? Chiaroscuro,
Yes.
the Italian version at least.
Yes.
Which is
It's kind
more
of
about like high contrast
light and
sort of thing.
shadow.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yes. Yep. And yeah, and
But of course, it has multiple
an
meanings
emphasis
too.
on right, an emphasis on the contrast between light and dark, an emphasis on the contrast between truth and lies, how our memories can trick us, expectation versus reality. All of those things are neatly wrapped up within that beautiful, beautiful title. And the fact that we have to go on an expedition
Mhm.
to go find that out and uncover the truth, if you will, I think really adds a whole nother layer of, as much as we want to find the truth, sometimes it takes a while. Things aren't as black and white as we wish they were. And again, going back to one of your earliest live streams where you talked about the significance of the age 33, it takes a dying oftentimes to really get at some of those truths and to really bring the light, bring the hope that the expeditioners wanted to bring forth from Lumiere. So yeah, there's a
I'll
lot
say
going
as well.
on there with kind of the text of the title.
I'll say as well, sort of related to the experience of that twist of the going out on this expedition to try to not to discover this truth, the truth of the matter, but discovering it along the way.
Right.
All of that, I think that is partially accomplished uniquely through the medium of a video game, because there's a lot of things that rely upon that interactive element, right? The fact that you, the audience, are participating in the story, that gives a different kind of significance to the sort of consequences of the choices of the characters, right? Because on the one hand, if you're writing a book, right, if you're writing a story, that the characters' actions turn out a certain way, you can kind of sympathize or empathize maybe with that. You can see the dramatic irony, but you acting in a certain way and then having these dramatic consequences, that's a very different thing, and that's something that you can really only tell in this way through the medium of a game.
Right. I honestly think the reason why the Act 2 clincher hit so hard for you was because, again, you feel some kind of moral responsibility and weight of these decisions that you've made leading up to this point, that you're like, whoa, this happened because I did this and I pursued this course of action. So yeah, again, I think you're right. It can only happen within an interactive medium like this, because otherwise we're disconnected and we lose all sense of moral agency.
Yeah, and there was one point that really, I think, drove this home. right? The importance of it being an interactive medium and the consequences of your choices as the player, as the audience. And it was the final phase of the Paintress boss fight, if you recall, where after she is essentially defeated, but isn't dead or gamaged yet, she's still there, and she isn't fighting you; she's healing you. But the only way to end the fight is by actually beating her.
Yep.
It's one of those things where you as the player are not exactly given a choice, but you're directed how to act by the narrative structures of and the sort of expectations of a video game. This is what you do. Here's do the thing, do the game thing. And you hit the attack button. I'm just like, yeah, that's it. It sort of drags you along, in a really fascinating sort of way. It's impactful. It does that. It tells that kind of a narrative. It tells that that uncovering of something profound and something secret in a way that I don't think you could do in most media.
Yeah, I think I think you're absolutely right. The fact that like you're expected to do these things and play the game, and like things are going to happen because you did these things. Again, that can't happen from reading a book because we're so disconnected from the events of the text that we don't feel any we don't feel like we actually contributed to the plot moving forward. Whereas in a game, especially a game like this, we definitely do feel a sense of not just accomplishment of progressing the story, but accomplishment of, hey, we went out and we beat the Paintress, and now things will be different.
Right. And then, of course, you have the consequences of that, right? The completely unintended and unanticipatable consequences thereof.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
So do we want to talk about metafiction, or did you have another?
Well, I know we wanted to talk a bit about existentialism and how that fits in with some of the topics that we have been talking about, because that's kind of it's kind of how I started off the series of giving a kind of primer on existentialism and how it sort of ties in. And I know throughout I've brought up a lot of instances where this is a really existentialist choice or a really existentialist point or a really existentialist way of looking at a particular character. That said, while there are a lot of existentialist points and themes and whatnot in the game, I think that it doesn't follow it doctrinally. It certainly doesn't follow a typical like Sartrean existentialism doctrinally.
Speak more about that, because I'm not well versed enough in existentialism to.
Yeah. So the big point of existentialism, like the main point of existentialist humanism, right, or the metaphysics of existentialism as it applies to human beings, is that we have no settled essence. That we are what we make ourselves, what we choose to make ourselves. And it is the primacy of unconstrained choice, which is the what defines us, right? And I think that gets subverted a few different times in a few different ways, because it certainly seems as if the people in the canvas, the people of Lumiere, and then also the rest of the people of the canvas, like including the Gestrels and the Grandi, whatever, the big guys, that all of them are they very much have their own essences that do not seem to be fully determined by their own choices. They're set people, and even this is really what tipped me off of this. They're set people whose essences can be reconstituted. Right? If Mael is, or I guess Alicia, is capable of, say, repainting the party after they're gommaged, purely from, well, chroma, which is either something, philosophically speaking, something like prime matter, or maybe it's something like their essences. Either way, we're departing wildly from existentialism. If she's capable of repainting them, reconstituting them as they were, as themselves, like really themselves, then they're not self-made in the existentialist sense, right? And I think that this kind of recurs a lot. It's kind of like the world is, the theme of the world is existentialist, but it keeps butting up against reality, and I think that's on purpose. I think that's written that way on purpose.
I think so too. I think because as much as people want to say that existentialism works and is a better system for living life, it clearly, I mean, look at the 20th century, which the game is set in. It just,
well, this was the very early 20th century. I think this is in 1900. I know that that Real Verso died in 1905. So the fire was in 1905. I know that.
Okay.
So I don't exactly know how long after this all takes place, but it's shortly after that. It's the first decade of the 20th century.
Now, you knowing more about existentialism than I do, I have an interesting question to kind of ping pong at you. Sure. Renoir and his, especially when he comes and he's like, you know, Maëlle, you need to get out of here and you need to come back with me. And she's like, no, I'm staying here and this is my home and blah, blah, blah. Would you consider Renoir to be almost acting, or is that an essentialist comment of like, you are what, basically you are my daughter and you're going to act this way and I'm not going to let you make yourself whomever you want to be? Is that kind of an existentialist versus essentialist fight there, if you will?
I think. Trying to formulate this.
Because upon rewatching that scene, I'm like, that's interesting, given the existentialist themes throughout the game.
I can fit that within existentialism, but it's a breed. It's a German breed of existentialism. So you'll have to forgive me. Yeah, I can fit that as a sort of Heideggerian outlook. So the existentialists have this thing about authenticity, right? Which is, for Sartre and for most of the French existentialists, authenticity is about radical freedom. To act authentically is to act on one's own, by one's own will, by one's own choices, unimpacted and unaffected by anything external, right? Or at least not determined by anything external. Not letting circumstances determine what we do, not letting expectations of others determine what we do. So in that sense, we've got Maëlle being a pretty good, authentic Sartrean existentialist. But then we have Renoir coming in as a kind of Heideggerian, who was a phenomenological existentialist. He was still existentialist, but he also was he followed Husserl. Husserl? Wait. No, Hegel. Through phenomenology. And so authenticity for Heidegger, who came much later, by the way, he had not written yet by 1905. Actually, neither had Sartre, so never mind. The timing for this game is weird in that case. Whatever. I'm going to get distracted. Excuse me. For Heidegger, though, live authentically is to encounter what he called angst, or anxiety, or angst, like a teenager, like Maëlle. So to encounter, for Heidegger, that's experienced with either profound joy, but then Heidegger, being an interwar German, says, yeah, but that never happens, so we can ignore that. He literally says this, by the way. He says, yes, no, this experience can occur through profound joy at the world, but almost no one ever experiences that, so we can ignore it and focus instead on anxiety and terror, which tremendously German. But typically anxiety is produced by an encounter with one's own mortality. Either an encounter with mortality, with death in general, with one's finitude, or with one's what he calls thrownness. The fact that we just happened to be here where we are, and that we have no profound control over that. We find ourselves somewhere, then we act, right? And so for Heidegger, acting authentically is making these profoundly free choices, like a Sartrean existentialist would have us do, but in light of the fact that in light of a real confrontation with reality, right? Without any kind of self-deception. Because for Heidegger, that's what's inauthentic, is fleeing away from this experience of anxiety, this experience of mortality, of finitude, of any of that, right? Of acting as if we can just pretend the world is how we want it to be. Acting as if we can, we don't have to worry about our friends and family dying. Acting as if, my big brother didn't die in a fire trying to save me, right? And so Renoir, in telling Alicia, no, I understand that this is kind of happiness for you, but it isn't real. And I know that your real life is horrible and tragic, but it's real. And your mother and I want you to come back to it. Well, I don't know if your mother and I, because Aline doesn't exactly want to come back either, but whatever.
Yeah.
Come back to reality. Deal with the facts, right? The facts of the matter are that Verso is dead. Deal with the fact that you're injured. And if that means that you're going to then re-enter a canvas sometimes, enter into these made-up worlds, fine. Don't lose yourself in it. And know what's real. Right, so I think you can make an argument that Renoir here is not exactly being a realist or an essentialist. He is being an existentialist, but a different sort. So this is a sort of existentialist civil war we have going on. I think maybe something like that is what we see.
That's making sense.
That, or this entire video game's whole core lesson is go touch grass, which, for a game that takes at least 50 or 60 hours, that seems like an odd lesson, but whatever.
That, I was thinking about that scene, and that reminds me of the ending of one of my favorite films. Have you seen the movie Ready Player One?
No, I haven't, actually.
It's a phenomenal movie. A bunch of 80s callbacks and
honestly, when I started seeing previews for it, it looked rather silly. It looked like it might have been fun, but that's about it. It was really profound. That impresses me.
It is camp in like the best way possible. It is silly, but it's silly in like the best way possible. To give a brief kind of overview of the film, basically everyone's living, and I think it's like 2045, 2050 or whatever, and basically the world has gone to crap. No one wants to live in the real world, so they put on these headsets and they enter this virtual reality called the Oasis, and they can live out their lives, and it's basically like a real life sim thing.
Yeah.
And basically there's this whole big war because this tech company wants to monetize the virtual reality and force the players not to have their freedom. And by the end of it, one of the main character, this video game nerd, wins control over the virtual reality. And one of his first decisions is to shut off the virtual reality for like 1 day a week. And as he says in the closing line of the film, he says, everyone got mad at me for shutting off the virtual reality because everyone enjoys living in this virtual reality. He said, everyone got mad at me for shutting off virtual reality for 1 day a week. He said, the reason why I did that is because we have to live in the real world. No matter how bad real life gets, we have to live in the real world because it's the only thing that's real.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And so thinking about that and Renoir's conversation with Felicia, I'm like, oh, this is just an echo of Ready Player One's lesson. That no
Yeah.
matter how bad life gets, we need to live in the real world because it's it's the only thing that's real.
Well, I think I'm not sure if, and this is probably going to lead into the next part of the discussion of we were planning on metafiction and the sort of metaphysics of what fiction is. But I don't think that even Renoir would hold that to be true, right? I think that all of the painters see the reality within these canvases as real. Just just understanding that it is a sort of subcreated reality, that it's no substitute for uh, the real world outside of it, right?
Right.
It's a complement to it, right? And so he has this conversation with I think it's with Aline when she re-enters the canvas and says that she taught him how to paint, how to enter into these canvases, how to enter into these worlds, but not get lost in them so that essentially he would die in the real world. He would lose himself in fiction. Which I think is a really, really beautiful sentiment there. That it is worth it's a wonderful and beautiful and profoundly worthwhile thing to enter into these subcreated worlds, whether the ones that we make ourselves or whether that somebody else makes for us, but not to lose ourselves in them. And that is a razor's edge to walk. And it's one that I think takes a tremendous amount of virtue and self-discipline, one which you can't expect a 16-year-old to have. And so I think that's large, or 16-year-old, or someone who is profoundly affected by grief. Right? So that that's the reason why I think that Renoir is so hell bent on destroying Verso's canvas, is because he knows that neither Alicia nor Aline, in their present state at least, are capable of maintaining that balance. But it's a balance worth maintaining. Right.
Right. And
Maybe
I
I'll talk more about
think
that when we get to talking about the endings, but
yeah. I, I think you definitely raise a good point here, and this might lead well into our discussion on metafiction, because I don't think the game is saying, and I don't think we would argue that spending time in these creative worlds is a bad thing.
mm-hmm.
They
Right.
just need to be balanced with reality.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back to my Ready Player One example, the main character he only shut off the virtual reality for a day.
Right.
1 day a week. All the 6 other days, people could spend as much time in the virtual reality as they wanted.
Yeah.
So again, it's not an either or. It's kind of this both and with a respect and appreciation for both.
Yeah. Now, terminologically, my quibble there with the ending of Ready Player One, as you recount it, because again I haven't seen it, but maybe I will at this point. Um, is that I think that the fictional worlds are real in a few senses, right? So in one, the obvious one, right? You and I are talking. We are inhabiting a virtual space right now, right? You're not. You are not right there. Right? If I point to you on
Right.
my screen, right, clearly, right, you're over like. Well, actually, I think I did probably point to you just now because that's like northeast, but you are over there, but just like way further than my screen is, right? But I think this is a real conversation. Clearly, we're real people. We're really
Right.
interacting and it's just that our communication is being facilitated by um a kind of virtual reality. Now, maybe I'm in a Heideggerian mood tonight, but I think it might be useful to look to the etymology of virtual. The Latin root of virtual is vir, which is power. Technically, it's man, but it's power, right? So when we talk about something so say if we were to talk about something being virtual in, say, the 13th century, that time period where I'm most comfortable talking philosophically, if Aquinas were to say something is virtual, what he means by that is not that it isn't real, it's that it has the power of accomplishing something, right? So if so this is for example, if I have a power or I have something virtually, if I have a thing virtually, it means I have the power to have it. Not that I have it, but I have the power to have it. The typical example is something like if I say if I have say $20 in my bank account, I have it virtually. That is to say, I have the power to call upon it. Right? Or right now, I have say my drink over here, my Loch Lomond over here. I have it virtually. I'm not drinking it, but I am virtually. I'm in the process of drinking it, but I'm not doing it right now. I can in fact do this, right?
Mhm.
Right. And so when we talk about virtual reality, it's more like it's a reality that we are capable of mutually constructing and participating in, maybe something like that. And so that applies to any kind of virtual reality, right? Whether that's just you and I having a chat on Discord video streaming or whatever, or whether we are meeting with VR headsets, or we are plugged into the Matrix, or we are together in the canvas of one of our dead brothers or something, right?
Right.
It's real in the sense that the people interacting with it are really interacting with each other and with the environment, and are treating the environment as if it's real. Right? Like I'm treating you as if you're real, even though you're a bunch of pixels right there, as far as I can tell.
Mm.
And as far as your dad can tell, none of us are real anyway. We're all just AI anyway, right?
I
But
was waiting for you to make that joke.
naturally, hey, but there's another sense too in which what we call virtual realities or something like the canvas is real, right? In the sense that I can say true things about anything in the canvas, right?
Yes.
So if I talk about the example I used when I talked about this back on the live stream, funny enough, before I knew that the canvas wasn't real in the context of the game, but so I accidentally went back watching. I went back and watched that yesterday, and I just blew my own mind for how accidentally profound I was being, completely by accident. I did not know the context at the time, I swear, but I meant to be talking about saying true things about Lune, right? In the context that she is a character in a video game, not in the context that she is a character, a painted character in the canvas in the video game, but she's a layer further down. But if I were to say something like she has black hair, right? Lune has black hair. That's true. The only way for that to be true is for it to be true about something, and that something has to exist, has to be a thing, right? And what's it true about? Well, it's a person. Because Lune has feelings and emotions and thoughts and wills and in all of the stuff that comes with personhood. But I know that the problem with that is then presumably, well, do we say that she's a real person with a life of her own? She doesn't seem to have her own experiences, but yes, she does. Sure, of course she does. She recounts a lot of the memories of those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? I mean, what do you think? Okay, let me put it this way. Is Is Lune a person in the context of the game?
Within the context of the game, yes, Lune is a person.
Okay. Is she
And I would argue, um, I would even go so far as to argue that if we are speaking solely within the context of the game, we can make statements about the characters, about the setting, about the plot, and all of those statements can be true statements, they can be false statements. If we were to expand and go outside of the context of the game and start making claims about the characters and such, I would have to say that, given what I know about the metaphysics of fiction, I would have to say that those statements would be false because they're not applying to the context of the world within the world. They're applying to the context of kind of this outer world, if that makes any sense.
Okay. So I think I may have just got you at a contradiction here because Lune is just a painted character in the canvas in the game. Right? So
Yep.
how can we say that she is a person? She is just as fake in the context of the game as Renoir is to us.
Aha.
Right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. And yet I just claimed that she's real.
Yeah. In the
She's
context of the
not.
game. She's certainly less
Right.
real in the context of the game. She's certainly less real than Alicia or any of the Dissandras.
Right.
But she's a real person.
Because right.
Right?
She's less real because she's the creation of a creation, essentially, right?
Yeah.
If I'm understanding correctly?
Well, is she?
Yeah.
Is she? Who created Lune?
At least she
Do you
did.
see where I'm getting? No. Well, in the game, it was Aline. It was the paintress. It was the mom.
Or Arlene did, yeah, excuse me.
But that's not actually correct, is it? The writers, the writers of the game, like the developers, like Sandfall
Yes,
Interactive created Lune.
I was actually going to say the writers, but I was worried you were going to contradict me there.
Not those writers, but not the writers that the painters are at war with,
Right.
whatever that means.
Yeah.
Really fascinated to find out more about that maybe at some point, but regardless, I know you are too. But, anyway, no, that's the thing though. That's what's so weird about this, is that I think this relationship between the painters and the people in Lumiere, it's, hold on a second. Good night, hon. Please go to sleep. I'm working. Good night. Go, please. I'm working. Oh, maybe. There we go. Welcome back. Sorry about that. Saoirse came wanted to say goodnight. Anyway, so yes. I think that this relationship between the Sandfall Interactive, let's say, the studio, and the paintress, and the Lumiereans characters, it shows this kind of layering of not just beings, but causality in general. Right.
Again, yeah, it's both clear but obscure at the same time.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. But I think that, okay, we can draw theological conclusions from this, right? For example, there's a sense in which I made this drink, right?
Right.
Very clear sense. I mixed it. I put the ingredients into it and poured it into my glass. There's also a sense in which There's also a sense in which all I did was mix ingredients, and that this drink was actually made by Glenfiddich, the distiller of my scotch, which is the primary ingredient, but not the only one, right? There's also a sense in which God made it. And those are all fully true. Not like I did like, I don't know, 40% of it, and Glenfiddich did like 10% of it, and God did 50% of it. No. Each element is 100% responsible for the thing.
Right.
And so the same thing applies
So
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So Sandfall is responsible for the creation of Lune, as well as the painters,
and God,
as well as God, as well as whom,
yeah. So I am very tempted here by the view that I'm very tempted to say that fictional people have souls. Right? Maybe?
I want to agree with you.
I don't want to agree with me. I think this has to be wrong somehow. But, like, it seems like it's almost a reasonable. It seems like we're going in something like the right direction, but that has very odd and disturbing
where it'd be
consequences,
reasonable, but right, yes, because again, like, I mean, like, I'm a Potterhead, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be meeting Harry Potter at the Final Judgment.
Why not? Why not?
Because even though he was quote made by God, and I'm using made here in air quotes very deliberately, even though he was made by God, his soul, his animating principle, so to speak, are words on a page, not...
No, that's his material cause. That's what he's made of. I see. Here we go. I can deflect every ridiculous counterargument, or honestly, every probably correct counterargument that I can think of this conclusion. I'm afraid this might be correct.
But I'm trying to think of the properties of the soul, like fictional characters, like just thinking from the basic like plant level, they cannot grow and they cannot reproduce. So ipso facto,
I didn't say they were animals. I mean, yeah, they are, but I didn't say they were really. They really have an animate soul. They certainly have a rational capacity. Also, yeah, they do grow and reproduce, right? Harry Potter reproduced a few times, right? Am I getting that right? I forget how many.
Did. That's true. He did. I'm forgetting the fact that he had children. Dang it.
Yeah. 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 See, this is See,
I'm sorry. I'm putting up such shoddy counter arguments, but
no. Okay, so
you're right.
The only way you can get partial counter argument to this, I think, is if you. Well, there's two ways. There's two routes here. One is to go fully nominalist with respect to fiction, right? That what we're talking about when we're talking about a fictional character is simply it's not the character, it is the words that compose the story, and that's it.
Right. Yep.
Right. That it's completely reducible to words, and that those words are not actually about anything. That goes really far, right? That has disastrous consequences for our capacity to communicate about literature. No, maybe we have to go that far. Maybe that's correct. Maybe we have to be absolute reductionists about fictional objects. And that is, by the way, the mainstream position. That's the mainstream philosophical position insofar as there is one. There are, to my knowledge, at least this was true 10 years ago, give or take, when I was doing research on this, there are only really two realist positions. One I understand and one I don't, even after having done some research on this. With respect to fictional objects having any kind of being. One is what's called the creationist view by primarily by Peter Van Inwagen, who's a philosopher of religion primarily, but also dabbles in metaphysics, and so did some research on this, did some work on it, which is essentially that we create these things that are entities in fiction, and that they have the characteristics of they have all of the characteristics that we impart to them, but they're contingent upon us, whether that is contingent per se or merely contingent per accidents. He's not clear about, if I recall. I wish I had had time to go back through some of this research, honestly, before we did this. But the other view is Menong's view, which is, I don't even know what it's called, and this is the one I don't fully understand, because it has something to do with a sort of collective unconscious understanding of it, which, good luck understanding anything Menong writes, because he's a very profoundly confusing philosopher. Not to say he's wrong about everything, or that he's speaking nonsense. Just he's very confusing and difficult to understand. But as far as I know, the mainstream view of fictional objects is nominalist, purely nominalist. That they're just talking about words. That's it. So there is no truth maker to the question of when did Sherlock Holmes die? Wait, bad example, because he didn't actually die in the original collection of works. Sure, where did Sherlock Holmes live? There you go. There's no truth maker to that question. Like there's no factual answer to that question. That's the mainstream view, which I think is patently, obviously ridiculous.
Yes, and I would agree with you, because if nominalism is the default view within literature, and everything is just words, then why on earth do these characters, whether in video games or traditional literature, why do they elicit such an emotional response to us when
Grace just helped
they triumph
us.
or
Grace
they
just helped us. Harry had 3 children. Albus, James, and Lily. That's right. Or James, Lily, and Albus, right? That was the order? Either way, yeah. 3. Anyway, sorry, go on. Sorry, I interrupted. Go on.
No, but like, if novelism is true within the realm of literature, why do we have such an emotional attachment to certain characters? And why do we cheer when they succeed and cry when they fail?
Probably because we are strictly irrational, or probably because we're social creatures, and so we are choosing to have a sort of collective delusion and experience things together. And so the reason for that experience is so that we can share something, right? That's what we're doing when we tell stories, is we go on a ride together, so to speak. That's kind of the most charitable nominalist view, right?
Interesting.
Yeah,
I'm not
convinced by that at all.
I understand
nonsense.
I understand that position. I'm not convinced by it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Oddly enough,
the only other alternative is that we will we will see some fictional characters in heaven, God willing. And that's weird. It's really weird.
If I get to heaven and I shake Gandalf's hand, Vince, I will laugh hysterically.
No. Maybe. Simple Wonders of God will have Spider-Man in heaven for the kids. Sure. God can do that. Like, regardless of whether Spider-Man is like real or not, God could certainly create him, so why not? Right. That isn't even theologically controversial. I don't think. Is it? Maybe.
Not to my knowledge. Funny little side tangent. The philosophy professor I had in community college, the one who introduced me to philosophy, I told you he specialized in the philosophy of language. Yeah. And once he found out that I was going to be majoring in English, he is a hardcore novelist. And he's like, once he found out I was majoring in English, he's like, you should be a novelist. All good English majors are novelists. And I'm like, no, thank you.
I mean, a lot of them are. That's true, but I mean, they shouldn't be. Um, Honestly, because they can't take their discipline seriously if they are, and the problem is that a lot of them are nominalists, and so don't take their discipline seriously. There's
Exactly, and
that.
that's where we get schools of thought. That's where we get schools of thought like the literary criticism of deconstructionism, which I've briefly explained
Yes.
to you before.
Yeah. Well, because if there's nothing either true or false about Sherlock Holmes, right? Then suppose I, as a deconstructionist, were to write a story about Sherlock Holmes, wherein he grows up on a desert planet, um, in a galaxy far, far away, and he has an encounter with a mysterious mentor, who gives him his father's lightsaber, and he goes on a various adventure and blows up the Death Star. Have I written a story about Sherlock Holmes and just changed everything about him, or have I written a story about Luke Skywalker and scrubbed the name off?
I would claim the latter.
Yeah, a reasonable person would, I think. But a nominalist would just have to say, no, you've written a story about Sherlock Holmes. Because that's what
Well,
it's
and I
called.
wouldn't even so I wouldn't even so much call that a deconstructionist take. What I would call that is basically a an imaginative reinterpretation, if you will. A true deconstructionist take would take everything good about the character of Sherlock Holmes and flip it on its head. So, in a true deconstructionist reading, Holmes and Watson would be romantically involved, and instead of being a master logician, he would just be this bumbling idiot that manages to solve crimes through sheer luck
Or it would
reasoning.
focus on a particular aspect, maybe a negative aspect of his character, and like say his drug addiction, and it would make that the central aspect of his character rather than the detective stuff. Say, I think that would be a successful deconstruction, right? Or that he only does detective work so he can afford more heroin or whatever. Like, no,
exactly.
no.
And if you really wanted to put the cherry on top of the deconstructionist sundae, what they would do is they would take that drug addiction and actually hold it up as a form of virtue.
Right.
They turn his virtues into vices and his vices into virtues.
Right. Yeah. This brings up a couple of interesting issues. One being some of the, we can tie this back to Expedition 33 and talk about the virtues or vices of various characters, but I want to hold off on that until we talk about the endings once again. So pin in it, we'll get back to it. The other thing, though, which you wanted to bring up a little bit, because you wanted to bring this up, I think, was the what all of this says about the ethics of how we tell stories and how we interact with fictional characters.
Right. Yes. Setting aside the question of are these characters real.
Oh, thank you, Grace. I also did get the birth order of Harry Potter's children wrong, but do go on. She got it right. Check the chat.
If I do accept your argument that these fictional characters are real in the sense of the term that you're presenting, what ethical obligations do we have for them what ethical obligations do we have to lead them down a virtuous path? I think that's a very interesting question that is worth exploring, because again, we have a lot of flawed characters within the narrative of Expedition 33. Some more than others, but they definitely all have their flaws. So what ethical obligations do we have to them as players, as kind of puppet masters, if you will, to bring them toward virtue? I kind of have my own thoughts, but I'll let you have first crack at that.
For fear of setting aside, perhaps, fear of blasphemy, which is never that good of a thing to set aside, but let's be clear, this is an analogy. What obligation does what parallel obligation does God have to us? Right? So God is under no obligation to make sure that I am virtuous.
Right.
nor even to create a world in which I will become virtuous, nor
Right.
even to create a world in which I have a nice time. Does God have an obligation to make a good story, though? Maybe, probably not.
I would.
I don't think he has an obligation
I.
to, but
No.
maybe he
I
necessarily
would.
does, because beauty is an aspect of the transcendent. But
Right. I would say he wouldn't. He doesn't have an obligation to. I would say that he naturally would,
mhm,
as kind of an outpouring or an extension of him being pure goodness. He wants to spread his own goodness out through his creation. So
mhm,
therefore, although he's not obliged to help us in virtue, he naturally feels compelled to do so because goodness is his very essence.
right,
By but by his nature, he is compelled to help us on the path of virtue, simply because his goodness and his being are one and the same.
yeah, right, okay, that all tracks. What does that? What does any of that? What does that all tell us about the obligations we have to? Let's limit it to our own fictional characters.
Right.
Right. Say you're writing a story.
I
Is
am
it?
writing a story
Oh,
as
there
we
you go.
speak.
Excellent. Is it wrong to say place a character in unjust circumstances? My thought is no.
I would argue no as well.
Okay. Why would you say no? And then I'll say no. Then I'll say why. If we're on the same pack,
I
same
w-
track.
I would argue it is not unjust. It is not, you know, it is acceptable to place them in unjust circumstances because I, as the author, have, in a sense, limited omniscience of how the ending of the story will turn out.
Mm-hmm.
If I know that this circumstance is going to bring about a greater good for this character, it is morally acceptable to put them in an unjust position.
Okay. Okay.
That would be my argument.
Okay. So I would take a different route, but I think we might wind up with near the same conclusion. My reasoning would be something like that that as an author, I only write the story qua facilitating it. What I mean by that is if I am if I am interacting with the world of the narrative by imposition, then I'm writing poorly. Right? If I'm inserting that'd be like inserting Deus Ex Machinas, right? If instead I'm
Mm-hmm.
writing a narrative where the narrative flows naturally, then that is essentially the equivalent of God creating the world which naturally unfolds. And sure, I, the author, am responsible for everything that happens in one sense. But also, the way that the narrative unfolds itself is natural to the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a kind of unnatural imposition by me. Now, if I am doing that, if I am just sort of interrupting the flow of the narrative to introduce new elements to fuck with my characters, then maybe I shouldn't be doing that. In part because it's cruel, but
No.
in part because I'm writing poorly, right?
Yes. In my creative writing classes, Deus Ex Machina was considered one of the cardinal sins of creative writing
Right.
because
Well, because it's occasionalist.
you were basically giving yourself a get out of jail free card for any sort of plot holes you had written yourself into.
Yeah. Did you perchance watch the video that I made a year or two ago? I think it was maybe like 2 years ago at this point on divine causality and good and bad storytelling, where I sort of analogize.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
basically,
I
what I
did.
did there was I analogized the three main models of divine causality, those being open theism, occasionalism, and primary and secondary causality, the scholastic model, to different forms of bad and good writing, respectively. Right. So open theism is the idea that God creates the world and then leaves it alone. It's almost deistic. Like God does not neither knows nor completely controls the future. He can interact with the world, but if he doesn't interact with the world, he doesn't have any direct control over the world. Right? So this would be like the author who either just sort of writes stream of consciousness, right? Or just writes what's the term? What's the term for just writes just sort of what happens in a given day? Common in anime and filler episodes.
Like slice of life almost?
Yeah, that sort of thing. But it doesn't have a plot, right? Like, there's no actual plot to it. It's just, here's sort of what happens. Right? I've made these characters, and here's how they interact with each other, and let them do their thing, right? With no particular driving goal, right? That's not good, right? That's not well written because it's unstructured. That's roughly equivalent to open theism, which is the idea that God just sort of creates the world and lets it do its thing, but occasionally will interrupt once in a while and say, here's my son, or whatever.
And that is exactly the reason why I hate stream of consciousness writing, and most writing of the early 20th century was because they wrote like that. And in my opinion, that leads to not only a flat plot, you want a rounded plot where things are moving and happening, but it also leads to static characters. They don't change, they don't grow, they don't develop if everything is just stream of consciousness.
Right. Now, the flip side of this is the occasionalist view, which is the idea that there is no such thing as secondary causality. That is to say, creatures have no causal powers whatsoever, and that God causes everything directly through his sovereign omnipotence. God is the only cause. So if I say, I don't know, if I start speaking words, I'm not causing sound to come out of my mouth. God is making sound come from here and go that way, right? And my lips moving and me choosing is just an occasion for God to cause certain things to happen. The storytelling equivalent, or the analogy I make, is that this is like a writer who focuses solely on plot and says, to hell with logical consistency of the actual flow of the story. I want these events to happen. It's in then storytelling.
And that is what happened with the first D&D campaign that I ran in my homebrew setting, because I had my world all planned out and I had the plot all planned out. And when the characters tried to mess with the BBG in like session 2, I'm like, oh, I'm not prepared for this. And it really derailed the entirety of the rest of the campaign, because I had everything in place and I wasn't accounting at all for player agency.
Yeah. It's easy to fall into that, especially, and I will say, especially if you're used to, I don't know, writing your own novels and writing your own narratives. If you suddenly find yourself in a collaborative effort, that suddenly gets thrown off the rails pretty quick.
Yes.
But then the middle ground view, though, is anachronistic, because this was the earlier view. The scholastic view of primary and secondary causality is that both I and God am fully responsible for everything that I say and do and think and everything. Right. So when I choose to do something, it is genuinely my choice, and it's also God is causing it to happen. Both of these are completely and equally true. One in a primary sense, that God is the ultimate cause of everything, and the other in a secondary sense, that I am the cause of my particular actions. Right? Okay, so this is the equivalent of, the author's writing, right? But there are these two completely different answers that we can give to why did that happen. One, because it's part of the plot. Two, because this character did it, and they chose to do it for their reasons. Right? So
and that is why, as I'm learning more about writing, as I'm in the midst of starting to write my own fiction again, I write better when I adopt the mindset of honestly, I write better when I adopt the mindset of my characters. This
Yeah.
character does this because they are this way, and this is what will happen naturally as a result.
So, we're going with all this. um,
Something about the
because
metaphysics of
we
fiction.
were talking about the ethics of character writing, right?
Yeah, the
So,
ethics of it.
right,
Right, yes.
because if not only is it that I ought to write in such a way that there is a not necessarily a happy ending, but things are ultimately just and consistent, something like that, right? Um, but that's because one, justice is a fundamental part of reality, right? The good is fundamental to being, but then also because it should be consistent with what's going on in the world of the narrative, right? The narrative should flow on its own in a certain way. It's just that I'm writing it so that the way that it flows is in these specific arcs. Those two things need to
Right.
coincide. They need to work together. And that's what good literature is when things coincide in that way. Right? Everything makes perfect sense internally, and also it's a good plot, a good story.
Right.
Right? Now, when I say to the ultimate conclusion, whether it's okay to be mean to your characters, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 does not have a happy ending. There's no good ending. There's two endings. Neither is good.
Nope.
There's one.
Neither is good.
Yeah, there's one which is how would I describe the Mael ending? Unsettling. And there's one which is depressing. And that's all you get. Right? And so why is that okay? Because I do think that it's well written. I don't think that the writers did anything wrong to their characters. And I think that that's okay because both endings are the results of the character traits, both positive and negative, of the characters. They're largely the just consequences of the very realistic choices to be made by the characters, even if they are bad choices. Okay, so with that in mind, which ending did you like? Which did you think was the better ending, and in what sense?
See, I think the better ending, and I'm trying to be very careful with my words here because I'm honestly getting the two endings mixed up. So forgive me.
So to clarify for those who just saw my live stream, the ending that I did on stream was the Mael ending, the ending where you choose to play as Mael, where Mael defeats Verso, she stays in the canvas and sort of recreates everything as she wants it to be.
Yep.
Then it ends with with her sort of painted eyes. The implication being that she's essentially dying in the real world, and that maybe her vision of things in the canvas is not exactly how everyone wants it to be. The Verso ending is where you choose to play as Verso instead, and you defeat Mael. You kick her out of the canvas, and Verso. This was not on stream, so if you didn't see me playing this, it's because I did it off stream. Where Verso, the painted Verso, takes the little kid, the bit of real Verso, who's responsible for the canvas, keeping things up, and tells him to stop painting. The canvas is erased. And it ends with the Descendre family paying their respects to at Verso's grave, and the erasure of all of the characters from within the canvas. So those are the two. The Mael ending is the one in the canvas. The Verso ending is the one where it gets erased. There we go. Terminology set.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Thank you for that refresher. With that being said, I think that right decision, at least the one that I prefer with my knowledge of literature, is the verso ending.
Okay.
And I would argue that that is because with the canvas erased, the family can finally address their grief and live in reality despite it being harsh and dark.
Okay. All right. I think you make a good point, but there's also the genocide to consider.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
I mean, there's that, right? So, see, this is the trouble. Right? I think that I tend to prefer, not strongly, but I tend to prefer the Mael ending. Because I do think that the people within the canvas deserve to live. The people of Lumiere. And the Gestrels, and the Grandee, and Esquier. Verso's creations deserve to live. Now, the trouble is, that's not why Mael chooses it. That's not her goal. That's not why she's doing it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, on the flip side, your explanation is, I think, accurate to Verso's motivations. Right? So what really struck me, and this is, by the way, I mentioned, I forget if this was while we were live or while we were just chatting beforehand, that Master Samwise did a very long, very in-depth, and excellent review analysis and of Expedition 33. Great channel. Check him out. And check out this video. It's very, like I said, it's very long, but it's worth watching.
It is worth watching.
But this is something I think he missed that I thought was really interesting, really crucial about the Verso ending. That they end mourning Verso's death, right? They end at his grave. Mm. But they also end after painted Verso had just died. And what did he die doing?
Playing the piano, right?
Mm-mm. No, that was the Mael ending.
Or was that the other ending?
That was the other one.
Okay.
Why did he die in the one where he erases the canvas? Why did he do that?
Because he's part of the canvas too, isn't he?
Yes. So why would he erase it?
Gourmand.
Yeah.
Basically gourmanded himself.
He sacrificed himself for what?
For reality?
No, not just reality. For Alicia. For Alicia to go on living her life. Because if it were okay with Verso for Alicia to just die happily, he wouldn't have saved her from the fire. Verso died not just once but twice, specifically to save Alicia's life from something that was her fault. Remember? Because again, the reason there was a fire was because she trusted the writers. And then they set the fire, and then she was going to die, but Verso died saving her. And so Alicia goes into his canvas and then decides that she wants to stay there, knowing that will kill her. And so Verso dies, painted Verso, dies again to save her from herself again. So again, I think you're right from a literary standpoint. Absolutely. That is a great thematic ending to the story. Like, phenomenal. And again, that's something that I haven't really seen anyone say or anyone notice. But as soon as somebody said, well, he died so that she could live her real life. I forget if it was Master Samwise who said that, something like that, but that just immediately clicked with me. Like, wait a minute, it's the second time he did that. Which, first of all, that tells me that painted Verso is a real person. because he made that choice, right? But also that he is exactly the same heroic older brother that already died to save her once. It's such a good thematic ending to the game story.
Mhm.
Now that said, he also committed genocide to do it, so that's not good. Not
Yep.
good at all. But um, that's unfortunate. Now you actually saw the Verso ending, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Um, the the reactions of the
It's weird.
characters are interesting too.
It's it's weird to me. I think the Verso ending is the better ending from a literary standpoint,
Uh-huh.
but from an emotional standpoint, I almost prefer the Mael ending.
I 100% do. Yeah, I do too. From an emotional standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, from almost everything, I like the Mael ending from an internal perspective. But as a sort of summary of the themes, a culmination of the story of the game, yeah, I think I have to go with the
Yep.
Verso ending as being the more appropriate one.
Yep.
Now, on the flip side of things, right? Why why the Mael ending is tragic too is because she's clearly doing all of this for all the wrong reasons.
Yes.
She's just doing this because one, she hates her real life. Two,
Yep.
she can't let go of her brother. Either brother, Verso or Gustav. More Verso, notably, than Gustav, but either, really. Oh, by the way, I should mention the kid, the kid in the Mael ending that she walks into the theater with. I just immediately assumed that was young Verso when I was watching because it looks like him. Apparently,
Hmm.
there's a big controversy about who that is online. There's a big discourse
Really?
about who that is. Okay, so there's
I guess
there's
I didn't even catch that detail. So
yeah. Just automatically assumed that was a sort of restored version of that fragment of Verso's soul. So that's
makes sense.
something
Yep.
like a repainted or a restored version of the little bit of Verso that's really left in the canvas. That's one theory. That's complicated by the fact that old Verso is still here. So painted Verso still exists, even though the real Verso is real. Part of real Verso is still there and a child. Um, and also the fact that no one else has aged except for Verso. Old Verso has aged and no one else has. That's a little disturbing. It's something that somebody pointed out um, in one of these threads I was looking at. Um, the other theory is that is Verso and Lunay's child. That's Verso and Lunay's son. And that this is drawn primarily from the lyrics of the song that's playing at the time. And it's something like something like that he's drawn closer to, or he is here closer to Lunay, but Lunay could either mean the character or the moon, right? And it probably means the character, but again, it's not quite clear what it's talking about. So that's the other theory. The other theory is that it's one of Gustav's apprentices, which it probably isn't, but that's kind of the least popular theory. But I just assumed it was young Verso, which makes things even more wildly complicated that he's there, and so painted Verso is also up there on stage. It doesn't seem to want to be there.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Speaking of Lunay, is her name actually pronounced Lunay?
yeah, that's how they pronounce it in the game.
That
I know
that
it's supposed to be
is
Lune,
a
but
fascinating choice. Yes, because the word for moon is lune, not Lunay. So that is
yeah,
fascinating. It's
and it's spelled
interesting.
that way, right? It is spelled Luna with a.
L, L,
Is it accented?
nope,
No, I thought it might be accented in the
nope.
game though. Maybe not.
It it then her name might be accented in the game because an
Yeah,
accent
to distinguish it.
tells the reader to pronounce the e differently. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That
So
might be
her
why.
name might be accented in the game, but the word for moon in French is not accented.
Yeah. But it's spelled the same. It's just lune.
Yes. Yes.
No, lune spelled like that. To answer Grace's question in the chat, lune spelled that way is not the Latin word for moon. It's luna. That's at least the nominative. Lunae, which is how you'd pronounce that, Lunae, is genitive. No, lunae. No, it's not actually. That's not even a correct declension. I don't think. I don't think it is. By the way,
I don't know.
really bad.
I
I'm really bad at Latin noun cases. I'm sorry. It's my primary weakness in Latin language. Mostly because I speak English, and English has no noun cases, and every other language that I've studied at all also has no noun cases. So, sorry.
Trust me, trying to memorize noun cases is one of the most frustrating parts of French. Please explain to me. Please explain to me why a chair is feminine and a dog and cat are both masculine.
That's not what noun cases means in Latin.
Okay, now I'm even more confused.
Oh, I'll tell you later. It's viewers
right.
look it up. I'll try and explain it later. It defines what part of speech a noun is, basically, what part of the sentence it goes in. Most modern languages use additional words instead of noun forms. But anyway.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep, I understand. Yep.
Anyway, I digress. Yeah, I do think, like I said, I think that the theming of the Gustav ending, of the Verso ending, is spot on.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's not emotionally satisfying at all. Like, even slightly. I think part of that is just because it all of the characters that you've come this whole game to love are all dead.
Well, and
not even meaningfully
if the
dead.
Verso ending,
only Verso dies meaningfully in that ending. Everybody else just dies.
yeah. Even if the Verso ending isn't emotionally satisfying, I would argue that the Mael ending is not emotionally satisfying either.
Yeah. But that's all because of tone, I think. It's because once again, if you had altered the color grading and the music, and maybe some of the shot composition in that ending, it would be a happy ending. It would be 100% happy ending.
I mean, if you look at the way that Verso is playing the piano in the Mael ending,
yeah,
I don't know if you picked up on this, but I noticed that his fingers felt forced, as if Mael was forcing him to do something that he loved for her benefit.
Maybe.
So he did not freely choose to play the piano. Mael was forcing him to play the piano.
Maybe.
So not only is she killing herself, she's also killing the part of Verso that's most important.
Maybe. Either that, or he. I don't know if it's forced or if it's reluctance.
That could be too.
It could be either way.
He knows what's happening to Mael.
Yeah, it really could be either way. He knows what's happening to Mael, and he knows he can't stop it. Right? And so he's just that dramatically torn. Now, but what I mean, like, is if you take that ending and you just sort of rework it and replay it from the perspective of any character who is not Mael or Verso, suddenly it's a happy ending.
Oh yeah, assuming for the onlooker.
Well, assuming they have autonomy, right?
Yes.
Like, that's assuming that Mael isn't just puppeteering everybody, which is a possibility here. That is an interpretation of the ending. I don't like that interpretation at all, but man, it does kind of fit with her characterization throughout Act 3.
Well, and not to put too fine of a bow on it, but it does feel very French if she ended up puppeteering everything.
Yeah. What unsettled me about that, and what made me think that might be the case, is everyone just sort of standing around waiting, not in a queue, but just sort of on their way in.
Yep.
That seemed odd. Everything about it just seemed it was just off. They did a very good job of portraying it as just like wonderful happy ending, but it wasn't. You know, just like the end of Act Two, really.
Mm.
They did a great job with the ominousness of that ending. But yeah, so I think that what's interesting about it, about both endings, and about the fact that life keeps forcing what was it? Painful choices? Difficult choices?
Yes, painful
Painful
choices.
choices? That um
That's the quote. Yeah.
the fact of that is I don't think it's life that forces painful choices. Right? These are not choices that are imposed by the game devs or by the authors. These are painful choices forced by the characters and the interaction between them and their intersection, and especially their particular vices in the given moment. Because the only reason Mael did not leave the canvas, like leave and come back, was Renoir's insistence on erasing it. Now, he had good motivations for doing so, same motivations as Verso.
Oh yeah.
But his insistence on doing so doomed his daughter to die. In the Mael ending, at least.
Right. Yep.
And in the Verso ending, his insistence on doing so erased the canvas. Indirectly, but still. And that's genocide,
Yep.
going over, assuming that these are real people, which I think we can. Now, his motivations for this are completely understandable for good reason, but through evil means, I think. Like, honestly, man, in all of his sort of speeches, his talking to Mael, to Alicia, throughout the ending, throughout the boss fights. First of all, on a side note, Andy Serkis did one of the best jobs of his career in that voice acting. That was so spectacular. And also, I really, maybe this is it, as a girl dad, um, I really found myself empathizing and sympathizing with Renoir. That the the wanting desperately what's best for your children, even if they don't see it, even if they'll hate you for it, and even the frustration at, well, they're fighting, well, Alicia's fighting him on it, but he knows that, and he knows that this is best for her, and he's desperate to get through to her on it, and the only way he knows how to do that, the only way he can think of to get through to her, is to force the issue, even though that's ultimately self-destructive, but all he can think of, it's all he can think to do. Man, that is some just tremendous character work, and it's, again, it's all it shows the negative consequences of these the desperation that everybody's feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you have Mael, who is, a 16-year-old girl with tremendous power in profound grief. None of that's a good combination, right? And like watching that shift from Mael to Alicia throughout Act 3 is really interesting, because you can see the fact that she's not well formed in virtue. You can see that kind of maybe disintegrating her character further and further, to the point where by the end of it she's almost a villain, or at least that she's tremendously self-destructive.
Yep.
And again,
Yeah.
the tragic ending is is purely because everyone is damaged, psychologically and even morally damaged. That's the only reason why the endings are so tragic, so depressing, and that it is this painful choice. It's not because of the world that's forcing these painful choices. It's them.
And it pains me to say this, but I think this game finally made me bite the bullet and realize there is very little, if not anything good about the French.
Haha. Well, there you go. Is it? Well, that's the thing. Is this? I mean, yeah, sure, fine. It's told in a pretty distinctively French way, but also I think that this is really just it's a pretty human story.
Oh yeah.
Like just the like it's not. You don't
I
have to be.
mean,
You
is
can be a
this
human instead of being French and still sympathize with us, right?
right? Yes, yes. As
Sorry,
much as it
that
pains
that
my
was
heart to
even
do so.
that was just
Yes.
awkwardly stated. I didn't put in the effort I should have into that insult. My bad. But no, the point is though, right? That yeah,
I
sure, it's
mean,
told in a really
I don't
French way, but
know.
I think that this is really just it speaks to the damage that grief can do to you. You know,
Right. Is this just Lord of the Rings except with a catastrophe instead of a eucatastrophe? A similar sort of framework slash
if you end at Act Two, yes.
idea?
If you end at Act Two, yes. The, the narrative that's purely
Right.
within the canvas is
Yep.
Lord of the Rings with a catastrophe. Yeah, I think so. If you take it to be the story of Lumiere, then yeah, I think so. If you take it to be the story of the Dissandre family, no, that's a separate story entirely.
Right. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
That honestly was going to be, I forgot to mention it at the time, but that's the other reason why the Act 2 gut punch was so big,
Yeah.
was because you thought that, that was the end of the story, but it was just the layer being pulled back.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And you know the fact that like no, this can't be the end of the game. Not just because
right,
it's Act Two, but also because it doesn't feel like the end of the game. They're not telling this like it's the end, right?
right, right.
But it's the end of the arc. It's the end of the plot, the end of the mission, the quest. So yeah, no, it was,
So
yeah.
what are we to do about this? Tell better stories? Tell stories that are heartbreaking but still honest? Like what
I
coming
think
away
that
coming away from all this, do you have a better appreciation or a different appreciation about storytelling, Professor?
yeah, um, I don't tend to like tragedies. Again, I'm echoing Master Samwise here, but you know, are very similar in our sentiments when it comes to storytelling. Um, and so I find myself deeply unsatisfied with the endings. But I think what we can take away from this is that any tragedy well told is a lesson, right? And in this case, it's a sort of warning of getting lost in grief. And well, like you mentioned earlier when we were talking about French literature, the kind of the the profound stubbornness of the characters, and their failure to come together, to compromise, to work to come back together. I should even say, because they're our family, right? It's just they're acting as a bunch of individuals in conflict with one another instead. And I'll say the character who we've neglected to talk about, Claire, is in large part responsible for that too. Even though her actions are also understandable, she's barely interacting with the rest of her family because she's so hyper focused on the war with the authors or with the writers, with the writers. She's sort of diving into her work instead of doing anything that is genuinely going to be helpful to her family. Um, it's just another instance of that very same thing. Like it's a warning. I really think that it's a lesson that we can take away from it. And I think any good tragedy is going to do that. Any good tragedy is going to be a warning or a cautionary tale of some sort, at least.
Right. And I think, despite the fact that we've talked about, there is really no good ending, there is really no happy ending within the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think understanding that is the happy ending. Understanding that this is a cautionary tale. We're going to show you, this is this is a story you necessarily don't want to imitate in reality.
Mm-hmm.
That statement in and of itself is the happy ending. If you
Yeah,
just knowing that to proceed with caution with these sorts of things.
yeah. Or that at least. Well, there's also the other facts too. There's the other note too, that even in the tragedy there is heroism. All of the non-Dysandra characters are genuinely heroic, profoundly heroic throughout the entire plot. It's just that they get caught up in a larger story that isn't good for anybody involved. And sometimes that happens, And what are we to do? Well, we're to be as good as we can,
Mm.
even if, like Lune, you. Which also, by the way, this is another thing. I take a different interpretation. The little bit where she just sits and glares at Verso, I take a little bit of a different interpretation than that, at least initially, than Master Samwise did. He took that to mean she was giving up. She was saying, "There's nothing more that I can do. The end is come."
Mm.
I took that to mean, "No, you're going to have to kill me." I took that as an act of defiance, which I thought that was a really interesting reaction. Very much Lune, very in character for her. Rather than her finally saying, "Well, there's nothing more I can do. The mission is over." It's more like, "No, I'm not giving up. There is nothing I can do. But if you're going to erase this canvas, then you're going to stare into my face as you kill me." I see it as a last act of defiance.
Yeah.
Which, again,
it makes
you
sense.
said you
It's
said
consistent
that
with her character.
yeah, and you said Mael is your favorite character. I have like 7 favorite characters. This isn't fair. Like, the characters are
I
so
like
good.
Mael. I like Mael. I like Verso. I like SKA.
Yeah,
He's probably one of my favorite non-human
he's so good.
characters.
I don't know who
SKA
is my favorite is between SKA and Minoko. But as far as human characters go, um, Mael's fantastic. She's so well written, even though she's not a good person, especially by the end.
Mm.
Because look, she's 16. She's a kid. She's a teenager in a horrible, fucked up world, inside and out. Like,
Yep.
she's not gonna be well adjusted.
Yeah.
But she's written so well in that context. Gustav is maybe my favorite character. I really like Gustav. Watching one of his struggles that really got to me was when Lune asks him if he still believes in the mission of the expedition. She's insisting, "Do you still believe that?" And he says, "I want to." Or, "I hope I do." Like, and I said this at the time, but like, that is so profound, because sometimes you know what you should believe, but you know what you should hold dear, but you don't know if you really do or not. There's just something just deeply profound about that. That
Oh, yeah.
Gustav
think
knows the right thing, but can he get himself to hold to it? Well, ultimately, yes, but man, it's a struggle every step of the way. That is just the path of virtue.
Yes.
Beyond anything else, it's incredible.
It's profound because it is profoundly human. A lot of us know what the right thing to do is, but we don't know if we have the strength to do it.
Yeah, and it turns out he did, but he wasn't sure of that. And I mean, I love Lune, like I've talked about. I even have come around on CL. She was kind of annoying to me near the beginning of the game, but once you kind of see why she is the way that she is, and kind of see some deeper layers to her, she's also great. She's fantastic. I don't know, man. they're all good. And of course, Renoir is just such a good character. Again, I find myself being so sympathetic to a lot of his reasoning. Flawed as it is, brilliantly done. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I will say, fitting, perhaps. I can't say these things without a touch of humor because otherwise I'd have a problem saying it. But fitting that I start Expedition 33 when I'm 30 when I'm 33 years old. And that was very profound. And it's also fitting that I end Expedition 33 grieving. Again, pretty tremendously when it comes to me. I mentioned that we had to put our cat to sleep earlier this week, and just like that hit me more profoundly than any death of any human loved one, for reasons I've gone into elsewhere. But like, I honestly do think that set aside the emotionality of it, right? Which I'd like to set that aside on live stream, if you don't mind. But setting that aside, I think that the the lessons imparted by this game about grief are tremendously helpful in not getting lost in it. You know? So I can say that it is a phenomenal game with a great story, and like a good story, not just a great story, but a good one too.
Right. Yeah, and that's an interesting question. Can a story be good despite it having a terribly tragic ending? And I think we've touched on this, but
Yeah.
yes, it is a good story because it's such a cautionary story.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, people go away from the story recognizing that they don't want something like this to happen to them, to happen to their families.
And I think that you can do the opposite of that, right? You can have a tragedy that is not a good story in that sense, in the sense of being a cautionary tale. If the tragedy is just these are the great and good and heroic characters, and they just get screwed by the narrative at every turn. I'm thinking especially of A Game of Thrones. That is to say, the first book, right? Which is when I forced myself to keep when I read the books like before the series came out. I read the first book. I got to the ending and I was like, what? The only good character dies like a chump. And then I started reading the second one, and I just couldn't. I lost interest, and I did the same thing when I watched the series. I watched the first season, and I was like, oh, maybe they're gonna do something a little different. Oh no. Started watching the second and lost interest. Because again, it's the same. It's the same thing. And like everybody's been saying, there's a reason that Martin hasn't finished the series, because it's just purely subversive, and you can't end a story like that and it still be anything like good.
And I think he knows it, which is why he won't
Mm-hmm.
end the series.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think he's just lazy because he's done a bunch of other crap, but yeah. Yeah. But things like that, I think that's absolutely the case. You can do the opposite. It's not good. I think we can recognize that it's not good.
So, odd coincidence. I know I told you I recently started dabbling in writing my own fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't decided the length of my story yet. It might be a short story. It might be a smaller novel. We'll have to see how many scenes I plug into my story.
Mm-hmm.
Odd coincidence. I'm writing the ending right now. I'm writing the ending of it first because I know where my characters are going to end up, and I know what I want to happen to them. So I'm writing the ending first, and then now that I'm done writing the ending, I'm actually going back to the middle, and I'm in the middle. There's kind of a false climax, if you will. I did not plan this, but yeah, there's a lot of Expedition 33 that I unintentionally am drawing influence from to write my own story. So,
what are we, to be a little existentialist? What are we but a collection of our various influences?
so I don't know. It's very interesting, and I hope to. I mean, I hope to share it with the server
Yeah.
one day once it's finally finished, because this is.
I mean, share it.
I've tried.
Share it beyond just the
I
server once it's finished. Like, it should work, man.
I've trust me. I've tried writing stuff and ended up basically burning myself out a quarter of the way through. And like this is the first story that I feel actually is worth publishing. Like I said, I don't know if it'll be a short story. I don't know if it'll be a smaller novella. But I definitely am planning on publishing it in some way, shape, or form
Awesome.
once it is finished.
Awesome.
Who knows? Maybe if you're in the server, once we're done with some things, maybe we can discuss it over book club. It'd be interesting. I'd be intrigued to hear feedback.
Hey, if it's in my lane, I might do some philosophical analysis of it for content. Yeah, there's the thought.
I mean,
Who knows?
It's a very it's a very simple story, but like Expedition 33, there are a couple layers to it. That
Expedition 33 is anything but a simple story. I will say that. As Imsip keeps saying, he still does not know what the hell the story is about. So he has been watching since the beginning. So yeah, okay, fair. I'm not gonna dispute that. I get it. It's a deeply confusing narrative. To be fair, it's quite complex.
But
it's French, so what are you gonna do?
Well, to whet your appetite, I will say that my story is French. It's not written completely in French.
Okay, if it were, I probably couldn't read much of it.
But the setting is France, and I've decided to title my story "A Foretaste of Paradise." So do that what you will.
All right. Yeah. I am intrigued. That is a fantastically intriguing title. That's good. I dig it.
So,
all right.
Yes.
Well, anyway, yeah, that was a fantastic discussion. So thanks for coming in on this one as my resident English major and French expert. Frenchman, English and French.
I'm here.
A little of both.
Anyway. Yep. I'm here whenever you need me, Professor. So
fantastic.
Thanks for the discussion.
Well, yeah. For those of you who joined in the live stream, thank you for joining us. I see you guys in the chat. I was not as attentive to the chat as I usually am when I'm playing, but I did see good. Lots of Harry Potter conversations in there. That was our fault. But
yep.
But thank you anyway. Thank you for joining. I will probably be releasing the audio version of this, maybe touched up and edited a little bit. We'll see what I can do. Probably over this weekend, although I'm going away this weekend, so it might be a little late. But expect that to come out soon. That'll be for as the next episode of the stupid little podcast. So until next time, I am going to be getting back to Kingdom Come Deliverance on Tuesday, and I'm probably going to be starting Fable on Thursday. We'll see. Thinking about it. All right. Thanks again for joining me. Have a good night. If you haven't checked out, once again, if you haven't checked out Adam's channel, check it out. If you haven't checked out his Substack, check that out too. That's actually where you're a bit more active, right now?
Yes, I am a little bit more active on the Substack. However, I will be posting a video shortly on my own podcast. I just got done reading some excellent Greek tragedy. So if you're in the mood for more tragedy, you can catch my literary analysis of Agamemnon and that trilogy when it drops in.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. That'll be good. That'll be excellent. So yeah, everybody look forward to that. I'll post a link. Your channel's already tagged in the description, so anybody watching, check that out. I'll also put a link to your Substack, which I forgot to do, so I'll put that in there as well. So
yes,
check that out.
Awesome.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining me. And as we usually say, until next time, remember, don't be safe, be well, more importantly, be good.
Be good. Exactly.
Yeah. Night, folks.